Welcome to today's webinar. This is Kathy Weinberg-Kinsey, Volunteer Manager. We're delighted to have you as a part of today's experience, especially for experienced volunteers to get a feel for the updates to the 2019-20 Money Sense curriculum. All of you are active volunteers that we appreciate your time in the classroom. Been essential to our success and our ability to reach so many students. We're going to go through basically the updates in the curriculum, and allow me to also have my colleague introduce herself.
Hi, this is Kristen Rule, Program Director here at Secure Futures.
All right, this is the agenda that we'll be covering today. We'll be reviewing updates to the materials and curriculum changes. We'll be looking at a very brief logistics review, talking a bit about classroom engagement and ways to prepare for the classroom experience. Before we get started, if you have the ability to open up, access the resource library, or to log into our website using your volunteer login, it would be helpful for you to be looking at a set of instructor notes and the student workbook. We'll also be showing things on the screen as we go through it, but if you have access to those, it might be helpful for you to see what we're talking about and be able to make notes in your own copies or be ready to be prepared for when you're presenting the program. You notice that our instructor notes have new covers this year. We're delighted that the instructor notes and the student workbook have matching covers, so hopefully that will help you see and keep your material organized. You'll also see in the instructor notes that there are new icons, slightly different than there were in the past. I'm going to show you those right now. Yeah, we have slide separators. That's the same symbol that was there last year, but that basically tells you when you see that on across the page in the instructor notes, that's when you're changing slides on the Prezi presentation. The new arrow is important facilitation tips that'll help you guide the lesson and know what to say and deliver at that time. The pencil icon is our new workbook activity and resource note so that you'll know when to refer to that in your curriculum, in your instructor notes. And the light bulb is important notes that you won't want to forget to present. We're also delighted to have the format on the right side of the page that you're seeing, guidelines on how the timing of the presentation. The top half shows you an entire full lesson. You know that our lessons are meant to be 90 minutes long, and that's the format for a 90-minute format. We're doing at some locations a condensed format, and we try to set up one for a 60-minute, and that's when the teacher can't have us in twice or for some reason that's the better format. So that now is in each set of instructor notes, all three, so that if you get asked or agree to do a condensed format, you've got that format as well. In addition, there are, as usual, the bars on each page. Basically, again, the gray bars on each page will either be a discussion prompt or an activity prompt, or a place for you to add stories, examples, and notes, and transition note giving you a hint on what to say to introduce as you turn the page or move to the next slide. That has stayed the same as they have been in the past, with the exception of the icons that you'll now see for activities being the pencil. Don't forget to include prompts. You are all experienced volunteers. You know, you make the program different. You bring it, set it apart by the stories and examples that you bring into the classroom. So as you're preparing, be sure that you're filling those in. The other addition to the instructor notes is that the surveys answers have been included at the back of each instructor notes. There was some request that there are some volunteers who've wanted to review the answers with the students, and it also just helps for you to know what the answers are. So this is a post-program survey with the answers in bold print. If you do choose to do this, you find yourself with a couple extra minutes and you want to review this with the students, be sure to collect the surveys before you would utilize this review so that you don't have students changing their answer. Yeah, no, that's the basic updates that have been done to the instructor notes. Now we'll look at the student workbooks. The exciting thing about the student workbooks is a note-taking space that is available to the students. We keep developing this book each year to be more of a take-home piece. We're hoping that it is something that a student might consider, keeping, sharing with their parents, sharing with a sibling. And this new space on the left side here is available. So be sure you mention that at the beginning, that there is a note-taking space for them. The other thing that we're doing with the workbooks is we're focusing on what are the important things for them to take out of the lesson. So we're hoping it might be a piece that highlights the important aspects, things that we want them to learn. So it continues to have the note-taking space, the activities, and then resources, extra resources. And then on the back page, the Go Do It Now piece, please, if you have extra time as well, to use that to refer, because that's the take action activity for the students to use to apply the lesson to their lives at this developmental stage. So that's what's new in the student workbooks. Surveys, there's a couple of questions that have been changed in that, but that's not anything we're going to draw attention today. For those of you, we're just a reminder that we're not putting names on the student survey. Directions are right in the book on using initials, month of birth, date of birth, and your name on the instructor notes. This is a requirement that we have for confidentiality and and especially with the Milwaukee Public School District. And then the Prezzies, we're going to go through the activities in the workbook in just a few minutes.
All right, I'll take it from here. So first we're going to just do a quick reminder about some of the things that you should take into account when you are heading off into the classroom or getting started in the classroom. So probably one of the most important things is make sure you arrive early. I'm sure as you all have experience in the classroom, you realize that it might take longer to get from the parking lot to the classroom than you may expect. So always build in a few extra minutes. 10 to 15 minutes is usually good, but as much time as you can spare to make sure that you are situated in the classroom and ready to go when the next bell rings. When you are in the classroom early ahead of time, one of the first things you're going to want to do is make sure that presentation is loaded, the Prezzies are up, and if you've got time to check the videos and see if there are speakers that work in the classroom. Not every classroom has a full tech setup, and that's okay, but it's always good to know before you start to click on that first video whether or not they're going to work and if the Wi-Fi is going to be fast enough to play the videos and things like that. Now, we rarely have situations these days where the program contact or the educator hasn't pulled up the Prezzie presentation and loaded it ahead of time, but it does sometimes still happen. So if that's the case and they are unsure about where the link is or anything like that, just remember you can always go back to that confirmation email, either in their email or in yours, and pull up the presentation. It's great if the educator will introduce you at the start of the class, so you're not just kind of jumping in. It gives the students a moment to understand why you're there, and it's great for the teacher to also set their own expectations of what their students' behavior should be when they have a guest speaker. So if they can take 1 or 2 minutes just to talk to their class, get them oriented and on the right page to engage with you, that can be really helpful. And then another piece that we always encourage is to introduce yourself to the students as they're walking in the door. Use that time to hand out their name tents, their workbooks. Maybe you also want to hand out the pre-survey at that time and get them working on it. That's up to you, but that helps to build some rapport in the classroom as well and get them comfortable with you. Then when we open the lesson, first you're going to start out by introducing yourself, why you volunteer for Secure Futures and who Secure Futures is. Then work on establishing ground rules with the students. All of this information is also in your instructor notes, and none of it's new, so I'm sure you all do this every time you're in a classroom. But it's great to come to some consensus with the students about what the ground rules are going to be, raising your hand, things like that. Then they will complete the pre-surveys. You can have them work individually. Some classes, it also works well if you read the questions aloud and then they circle the answers themselves. So you'll have to kind of depend on, or see what's going on in the classroom, and what might fit best for how to distribute and work through the surveys. And then another point we always just want to reinforce, it's really important to adjust your pacing of facilitation to match the students' understanding and interest. We want you to follow them into this lesson. So that means checking in with them. Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? And just really reading the room to see if this is a topic that a lot of the students are really familiar with already, then it's best to move through it faster. Or if there's a topic that the students are getting really engaged in because they have a lot of questions, it's okay to stick with it for an extra minute or two. So you're really just working with them and kind of following their lead through the lessons to make sure that they're really understanding. One other thing that, and we'll touch on this again a little bit later, but I mentioned confirmation emails with the presentation links, but also, I'm sure you've all seen this before, but you do get the program contact or educator's contact information in that confirmation email. It's a really, really good idea to reach out ahead of time and just introduce yourself, even if it's something simple like, hey, I'm Kristen. I'm so excited to be in your classroom on Tuesday. I'll be there about 10 minutes early. That can be a great way to open up the door, but also if you can build a little bit of conversation and ask the educator about their students, about their classroom, that can really help to form a relationship between you and the educator.
Kristen, on occasion, I've had volunteers report to me that an educator actually doesn't respond to them. And just know that we, have been in touch with them and are in touch with the educators. And it's don't take it as a personal reflection. It's just the busyness of the educator not having time to get back to you.
All right. And then before we get into the specific changes in each of the lessons, there's just a few things that apply across all three that we want to talk about. Mostly our goal with our curriculum updates this year was to reduce the redundancy and improve the flow throughout all of the lessons. So we really focused on that, not so much about adding new content. There's probably a little bit that's new in a couple of the lessons, but really you're going to see that the lessons are very similar to how they were last year. But we just tried to make sure it was as concise as possible, and we pulled out anything that didn't really need to be there, as we know that there's a ton of content to cover, and we're trying to make it a little bit easier for you all. We did make some changes to some of the slide transitions, so you're going to want to make sure you check that and practice before you go into a classroom. We're just kind of always tweaking them to make sure that they are as engaging as possible, and that there's a lot of questions that you should be asking the students, rather than just giving them the responses on the slide. So you'll see that as well. So we have lesson objectives at the beginning of each lesson, but we call them, what will accomplish slides, which is really how you're going to set up for the students why they should participate. This is kind of what they're going to get out of the lesson, what they can expect to learn by the end of it. So we kind of reframed that a little bit to be more student focused. As Kathy had mentioned, our student workbooks have more take-home value, more note-taking space. And then this other little thing, we did talk about icons, but there's a correlation between what you see in the Instructor Notes, which is this black and white pencil on the left, and then in the Prezzies, every time there's something, either an activity or a resource to talk about in the student workbook, you're going to see this yellow square that has a pencil and a number in it. So that's your signal. So you've got two little symbols here, one in the Instructor Notes, the other that actually will pop up every time on the screen to help remind you, okay, this is a time I go back to the student workbook and have them do something with it. So that number represents the page in the student workbook as well. So that helps you orient the students to where they're going to be in the workbook and what they're going to be doing.
I think that's a nice addition, Kristen, to the curriculum this year.
Yeah, we're hoping it helps you all in the classroom just be able to look at the slide and know what's happening without having to flip around too much.
Okay, we're going to jump into each one of the lessons, and we're going to start with what's been updated in Bank Your Future. You'll see here there's just 7 bullet points that we're going to, six bullet points we're going to talk about. The earnings statements basically has been added to the student workbook just as a reference for them. We got feedback in the past that it was hard to see it on the screen, and we wanted to be sure that they had that visible for all of the notes on there, that you know that that's an engaging activity with them to look at the deductions and what's taken out of a paycheck. And so that'll be very helpful to them. Plus, it's something that they can take with them as an easy reference afterwards. The expense tracking worksheet is no longer an activity, and instead it offers the students a helpful example. We found we were really trying to cut time in Bank Your Future. We get your feedback and understand that it's hard to introduce yourself and get all the what needs to get done in Bank Your Future. So we've taken that out as an activity in the classroom and instead given you an example to show them what an expense tracking worksheet would look like, and then offer them a blank form in the workbook for them to take home afterwards. So in the Prezi, you'll see that here it is. It's on page 3 of the workbook. Notice the wonderful icon in the upper left-hand corner. And you introduce it, and then you can move it forward, and it shows an example. And then tell them, of course, the importance of this exercise is that tracking your expenses is the first thing you need to do to be able to budget, to know how much, what you're spending on. And that's what this, so hopefully that activity will take less time for you. The other thing that's been updated is the paths after high school and cost of college activities. We heard your feedback last year that it took way too much time for everybody to jot down, record all the options. So we're encouraging you right now to just have them to record 1 or 2 things that that they want to put in the workbook. And the other thing we're really excited about is the cost of college activity now has higher ed choices that are in Milwaukee. We researched and got local higher ed institutions that you'll be referring to, and are delighted that I have already presented this in a classroom, and the kids are really perking up because we're showing them UW Milwaukee, Marquette, MATC, and Bryant and Stratton as examples of public institutions, private, public in-state and private for-profit institutions. I had a rich conversation using this new stuff with it in the classroom. We also heard from experienced volunteers that there was an appreciation for the compound interest icon of the pile of money graphic. So we have put that back in along with the table illustration that we had added last year. So we find that that is a easy, quick reference, and it just visually makes a compound interest be an easy thing to introduce. And then we've added in the investment discussion, the other thing that you may recall is that there was a slide with popular companies to invest in. That slide has been removed. The importance of that was to show that you're taking less risk when you are investing in popular companies. So instead, we wanted to reinforce the concept of reward and risk. And so we've got a wonderful slide with a scale on it that reinforces that in a better way than the companies did. It's not distracting thinking about, and we're not feeling like we're recommending, you know, something Coca-Cola or Nike or whatever, but instead talking about the importance of investment in regards to reward and risk as really being the importance of that. We also replaced the investing video with one that explains the difference between stocks and bonds. Show that again if your students are interested and at that level. All right, we'll move on then to check it out. Okay, in check it out, the choosing a bank and credit union activity, again, that's the same change that we've made in regard to limit the note taking. We found that having them fill in everything in that activity just took way too much time. So again, encourage the students to take notes on one or two things that they want to look for when they're making a selection on a bank or a credit union, and you're going to save a lot of time there. The overdraft protection example numbers have changed.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. We got some feedback from some volunteers. They were noticing that the scenario we had set up didn't quite work right with how we had set it up with minimum deposit and fees and things like that. So we just took another quick look at that and cleaned it up a little bit so that it's a little more accurate.
Another thing that we've finally changed is our check writing activity. And I know that many of you have said in the past, how long are we going to write checks? We just can't quite totally get rid of writing checks. In fact, I had a volunteer training event last week. We had a property management person who said that she is continuing to have to educate anyone who she's having property with that absolutely don't know how to write checks. So we still are including the check activity, but it's more of, if you look at page 3 in the workbook, it's still a blank form, but we're asking them instead to copy what's on the screen instead of taking so much time. And the important has now changed to the importance of what you're seeing on the screen here. Most importantly, the routing number and the account numbers that they will use sorry, I got you off here. They will more often use in the future. So we want to, what they're instead in the student workbook is filling in what's at the end of each one of these arrows and understanding what's on the check more often. And then the importance that we're moving to, there's an additional exercise in the book for them to say, well, why is that important? Because you use those numbers to set up payroll direct deposit, automatic bill payments, and wire transfer. And that's on the same page in the student workbook for them to fill in those 3 things. Again, important lesson for them to retain for future reference. Let's see, discussion around debit cards, check cards, person-to-person payment, prepaid cards are reordered, and it comes to a more, the exercise again is leading to a new exercise that has a activity for them to focus on what we want the kids to retain. And what's important in this activity is for them to retain which one of those are coming directly out of their account and which ones are not connected to their account. So after you've reviewed all of those concepts, it's an application for them to remember afterwards what's coming out of their account. This got added in the student workbook as just because we feel this is so important for them to remember current balance and available balance. So it's literally in there as a ready reference for them. And the online banking has also been added in the student workbook, again, as a ready reference and a reminder for them to look and utilize when they are involved with a financial institution to remember what are the important things that you can do in an online banking situation. I'm finding more and more that there are students in the classroom who are doing this, and they can help you present this to the rest of the students. This is the other exciting thing that we changed this year. This is in our identity theft section, and just give them a couple minutes to see if they can unscramble them, and then again they'll put those words in the workbook and have that to retain for future reference because that's such an important concept as well. And as long as I'm in the workbook, I'm just going to keep paging through here. Identity theft tips are in there. Again, the note about secure websites is in there. And then the Go Do It Now is in there. And I think that is, check it out. I'll let you do To Your Credit, Kristen.
All right, so with To Your Credit, again, we just sort of cleaned up some of the activities. Last year, we started out with what is credit activity, and we had them fill in everything, what the couple different definitions of what credit is. And then we realized that that was taking too much time, of course. So what we are doing now with To Your Credit, it is basically fill in. So the top of the page for this activity says credit is, and it's a bullet point, it's a blank that is blank to you. So that would be money that is loaned to you. So what you're going to have the students do is, as you're going through these definitions, have them fill in the key terms and see if they can even fill them in ahead of time, just by kind of looking at the context clues of the statements. So then we move into credit card vocabulary matching activity, and this is the same as last year in that on one side they have the vocabulary terms, on the other side of the page they have the definitions, and you're gonna as a group discuss them all, and they'll draw a line between the two. But what we changed is that now we have them numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's the same order and the same corresponding numbers to when you're going to be reviewing the credit card statement. So that's going to be a little bit more consistent. And I can show you how that works.
We apologize that in the instructor note it's a little blurry what you're seeing, but we assure you that both in the student workbook and on the screen you're going to see there's a few pages in the To Your Credit instructor note that are more difficult to see. So if that credit card statement is a little hard to see in your instructor notes, rest assured the reason that we put it in the student workbook is so that they will easily see that.
Yeah, so you can see here that first activity, draw a line, so they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. And then as you go to the next activity of reviewing a credit card statement, you see the same numbers, and they correspond to the same vocabulary terms. So it's just a little bit more consistent and hopefully have a better flow from one activity to the next. So moving on from there, I'm going to follow Kathy's lead and just kind of show you the student workbook here, because that's where most of the changes are. So one thing you are going to notice is that last year we had a bunch of definitions for the credit card statement. They came on the following page that you weren't supposed to actually go over with them, but that can be kind of confusing. Why is it in the student workbook if it's not something we're going to talk about in class? So we took all those extra definitions out, because really it's the 4 that you defined in the previous activity that are most important. From there, straight into the comparing credit card offers activity. That is exactly the same as it's always been. We added, you'll notice this throughout as well, we just tried to add more directions. So if it's in italics, it's directions for the students, but otherwise it's exactly the same. Then we added in some credit card tips. This was part of trying to make the workbook have a little bit more of a take-home reference for the students. So that is just a duplication of that slide that is now added to the workbook. There is a new activity right in the beginning of part 2 where we are starting to talk about credit reports and credit scores. We are trying to draw that connection and show them how they're related. So this is the same slide that was there last year, but we take out the keywords, and after you show them the slide, then they'll fill in the words. So let me show you what this looks like in the Prezi real quick. So we've just gone through the car purchase example, and so we're trying to make them see, why does one person pay more than another? So this is the first version that they see of the slide. So you'll see if they can guess these keywords, and then you'll advance the slide, and it becomes credit score and credit report, and that's what they write into the student workbook. All right, so pop back to that workbook. Sample credit report, that's all exactly the same. And then we do have the extra detail on the different parts of the credit report, but as in the past, you don't have to spend time going through this page of the workbook. It's just for reference. The next 2 activities are the same as last year, where they will fill in the FICO score ranges and the percentages in what's in a credit score. And then the next piece, so we've got the loan officer activity, and let me pull this up. There's a slight change in the script that you get for the loan officer activity. So we'd heard that sometimes this activity can be a little confusing to do with the students. So we reworked the script that you'll get to hopefully makes it a little bit clearer. In the past, you got 3 copies. From now on, you get 4 copies. You will get 4 copies of this extra script in with your materials. So you will give one to each of the students that are in the role play. So it's just clear across the board. The left side of the sheet has the loan officer script and all of the questions they're going to be asking. And the right side has the loan applicant scripts for the 3 students who are playing the loan applicants who are being interviewed. Otherwise, all of the content is the same. The questions and responses are the same. We just laid it out a little bit different, so hopefully, and added some directions. Hopefully it's a little bit clearer. So we do want the loan officer to ask the student, or ask all 3 students, the first question, and then have all 3 of them answer. Then they'll go to the second question, and all 3 students will answer the third question, and so on. And then after that, same as before, they go through the whole script. When they get to the bottom of the script, then as a whole group with the whole all the students in the whole class, then that's when you go through the who should get the loan questions. So just a slightly different layout. Hopefully it's easier to read and makes a little bit more sense for the students. I believe that is everything that we cleaned up for 2-year credit. That one I think had the fewest changes, mostly just little streamlining and tweaks. So then I will just finish up this last slide here on wrapping it up, and then I'll pass it over to Kathy. But you all know this, but we always want to make sure we reinforce how it works when you get to the end of your class period. So if you are doing a 2-part lesson, you reach the end of part 1, you're going to have the students hand back in their workbooks, their name tags, and please ask the teacher and program contact to hold on to them in the classroom until you return, so that you don't have to worry about the students losing them or forgetting them. If you've gotten to the end of a lesson, you're going to distribute the post survey, and then, as we mentioned before, you can review the answers to the survey if you've got some time at the end of the class, but remember that you've got to collect those surveys back first so that the students don't get the answers. Then if you are at the end of the whole program, so whether that means they got 1 lesson and you've finished your whole time commitment there with the class, or they've gotten all 3 lessons and you're at the end of 2-year credit, you will have course evaluation, so you will hand those out and collect them back before the end of the class period. And we really want to make sure that we're encouraging the students to keep and use the workbooks and to share the information. So it's a great way to kind of end your time with them, is to say, don't forget, take these home, talk to your family and your friends about what you learned, and, ask for their help on the different go do it now checklist items that you want to work on.
All right. You all know that you hear from me regularly regarding scheduling programs. I did want to mention that I appreciate that most of you have already completed MPS volunteer applications. This year there is a new addition to that. They would like us to be sure that everyone who has completed the application has created what they call a VicNet account and logs their hours. This is actually, I know it seems like an extra step, and I appreciate those of you that have created the accounts. But what that will do is they will then retain your application on file. Once you log some hours at an MPS school, they will continue to keep your account open, and you'll not have to fill out an application again. So it's to your advantage to create the account and log hours when you are at a Milwaukee Public School program. So I appreciate your following up on that, and I'll be in touch with you on those things. Confirmation, you know that we send the confirmation and that I'll communicate any changes that happens. Material delivery, be sure that you keep us posted whether you want that to go to home or office. Our associate Felicia handles that and contacts you when your materials are headed your way. Notice that this is the second year that we are also, we got money from the Bucks and BMO Harris. And there are, in some of the MPS programs, there is additional materials. You'll be notified of that in the confirmation email, and you'll receive a folder. It's really nice that our colleague is collating the first lesson into the folder when you get that. So that's a folder for each kid. It includes a letter to the students. There's a nice note to the teacher with encouragement from Bucks and BMO Harris in that regard. And we appreciate the extra step that you have to go through with that. There's wonderful certificates of completion that you'll be giving to the teacher, and they complete them and use those with the students. So that's happening through this calendar year for the schools that it applies to. We appreciate that support that the Bucks and BMO Harris have given us. I will continue to check in with you, and I put reply all on this to remind you that when there are multiple people at the same school, I quite often do the check-in with everybody connected. I figure that if you're having problems with technology or the numbers of curriculum that materials that you had, that it'd be helpful for the other folks to know it as well. In fact, we currently Don is extremely aware that we were troubleshooting a technology issue at Reagan High School, and because we replied all, we were able to get volunteers to support each other, sort of like a volunteer chat. So I appreciate those of you who are experienced volunteers, that when you reply to that, I think it's helpful to one another to support each other and provide encouragement and feedback and troubleshoot together. We will continue to send you a link to a volunteer evaluation. You as experienced volunteers, we can't thank you enough for the input you give us. Many of the changes that we've been talking about are made because you gave us input that things needed to be addressed, and we are an input-driven organization and address them. And then return completed materials to us. A lot of volunteers are starting to scan them and return them, but you're always welcome to drop them off at our office. I love seeing you, or to mail them back in. We really appreciate those pre and post surveys and course evaluations. And again, if you don't have both the pre and post, no need to come to return them to us. We need both of those to make that a meaningful data that we're saving. There is a volunteer manual that we have available, and it's on our website. I just bring it up. It has descriptions for each of the volunteer opportunities that we offer and other policies and procedures that we have. The only time we ask volunteers to look at that are when they're completing their application. I am sure that none of you look at it in detail, but if you ever have an issue, we want you to know that it's a resource and it's available to you. Kristen briefly talked about this earlier, but it is so important to communicate with the educator, even if they don't respond, and minimally just to say, I look forward to being in your classroom. But it is an opportunity to ask any questions that you have. Is attendance an issue? Or what's the culture in the classroom, norms and procedures? Some of you have issues with cell phone policies. Some districts have them off limits, but each situation is different, and it just is sometimes helpful for the volunteer to understand. Roles. There is a link in the confirmation email to the teacher about what their role is, and to you as a volunteer what your role is. I can't encourage you enough to team up with the educator on behalf of the student. Many of the issues that you have in the classroom between you and the educator can be worked out. If you're seeing a student behavior, again, that's not your role to address it. The teacher is responsible for addressing any student behavior problems. But if you have any issues with students that make you uncomfortable or that you're concerned about it, you just can't engage that kid in the back row who keeps having their head down, talk to the educator about it and see if there's anything that you can switch up on the way that you're presenting, and the educator recruit them to be on board with helping you with engagement. So team up with the educator, ask them to answer questions, get them involved. Can't tell you enough how that makes the success in the classroom a better situation. Classroom management is the educator's responsibility. Ask for it when you need it. You all have been in many classrooms, but we just wanted to briefly talk about, instead of the elephant in the room, the things that are different nowadays in regards to high school classroom. Cell phones are there. There weren't cell phones in the classroom years ago. You might see students that just are not as respectful of authority as we may have been raised in the classroom years ago. It's just not the way that we roll nowadays. There is definitely, your students are intelligent and aware of world events. Use that, ask them questions, draw it in. There's going to be more interruptions and distractions. You've all been in the classroom where something's either going on in the room or outside in the hallway. It's just the way that it is now. There is a lack of engagement. Students may be sleeping, but the bottom line is there will be students there who are excited to learn about money. Focus your attention on them. It often brings the other ones on board. But just to be aware that, things are different, and it's helpful to just recognize that. Again, use the teacher to help you if you're having any issues with how things are working. As far as what does work, here's some helpful hints. Learning styles. We've tried to build in different learning styles into the curriculum, but kids want to learn auditorially, they want to learn tactily, they want to learn in different ways. So use that to engage students because they are learning differently. Be aware of that and emphasize different ways that our curriculum brings that out. Trust plus respect equals rapport. As we said, students are likely to be not as respectful, but you can earn their trust just by coming back. Sometimes they distrust you on your first visit, but the more you come back, they know they can count on you, and that's how you'll establish rapport with the students. Be authentic. Don't try to be something you're not. Go with the activities and things that are your strong points. Be authentic with the examples and that you share with them, and students will see that and learn for that. Vulnerability. Go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah, to talk a little bit about vulnerability. So the students always talk about how powerful it is to hear from people who have their lives together, they appear to have their lives together, that are doing well and are successful, but have made mistakes. That is a lesson that you can teach them, where sometimes they think, oh, if I make a mistake with my money or I make a mistake early off in life, that's it for me. I never have a chance. And so it's really powerful, really, really powerful when they hear someone who to them looks like they've got it all together and everything figured out to say, no, I actually made mistakes. I maybe took out too much student loan debt, or I had to deal with a lot of credit card debt in the beginning of life, but I dug my way out of it. I didn't have a great credit score, but now I do. So to really talk about that vulnerability and show them that everyone makes mistakes and all you have to do is kind of work to get out of it, that goes so far with the kids.
Excellent. To speak to them, not at them. Engage them in conversation. We say it's a discussion-based presentation, so go with that. Ask questions. Be interested in the students. That developing a relationship from something that you learn a kid is working for a particular employer, and you can bring that back in later lessons, and it just shows that you care about them. I was in a classroom last week. They had homecoming the week before. I asked kids if they enjoyed it. It just shows that you care about them and you're interested in them. Treat them like the young adults, that they have value and that they have valid life experiences. So just honor them and who they are and what they bring to the classroom. I'm sure many of you do all those things, but there are things that we're learning are important to bring up to our volunteers in general. Preparation tips. Online training is always available. We have just updated it with the additions to the curriculum that have been changed this year. So if there's anything more in detail that you want to go through, or I oftentimes recommend to volunteers that you do it lesson by lesson before you go back into the classroom. So the lesson update summary.
Yep. So that's the one pager that we put together every year. It is on the resource library. It's basically what we've done together with us all. It also goes in with materials?
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Yeah. Although we might stop that partway through because it's actually a link in the confirmation as well.
Oh, that's right.
I just, as the fall begins, you may be getting duplicates of what has been updated, and I apologize about that. If that's, for those of you who are participating today, you've got this. So.
Yeah, nothing on there that you haven't heard us talk about.
As you know, the resource library is available. You have a day that where you need some inspiration on what works in the classroom. We recommend that you go that. We're working on that as an education committee and hope to be updating that and having even more available. Be sure you do a dry run, check the slides. You got to know those transitions as you're moving through it. And practice, do it out loud at home with teens that you know or out loud at home so that you've got it. You all know how to use your volunteer login and find the resources that are available there. I really appreciate your being here today. You know that financial education, we believe that it's an underutilized weapon in the fight against poverty. This is a quote that we're taking from the Next Gen Personal Finance nationwide. Only 1 in 20 students are getting, financial education, attend a high school that has a personal finance requirement. There is a need out there for what we do. And our solutions are the Money Sense program that we've talked about today, also our Money Coach program and our Money Path program. Several of you are already trained for our new Money Path app in the program. We're finding that it's more and more becoming desired by the teachers that we're scheduling with. There are quite a few programs that are available on our website that are 4-lesson programs. In fact, I think a couple of you are involved with that right now. If you have not yet trained for Money Path, I strongly encourage you to do that. It's an app-based program in which the students are working through a financial planning program regarding their career choices and budgeting. We will have another training session. In fact, it's already on the calendar, and there will be more this year. So if you think that might be something that you're interested in, I strongly encourage you to do that. You all know about our Money Coach program as well. That's a semester-long commitment. We will be starting a new semester in the end of January, beginning of February. There will be a training event at that time. Volunteers work twice a month. It's a bigger time commitment with the students, but the students are setting goals and working through some life-applicable lessons that are just life-changing. There is a new volunteer role decision tool that is available both on the volunteer opportunity page. There's a link at the top. It's also on the FAQ page on the website. It is a fantastic tool to help you figure out whether or not you have time, whether or not you want to do Money Coach or Money Path. We are delighted to have 3 opportunities available for volunteers and are finding that volunteers are choosing ones that fit best for them, and they come and go out of programs as well. I have several Money Coaches that do it one semester and then do Money Sense on the semester that they don't do Money Coach. Money Coaches are presenting Money Path within their program, so our programs are definitely intertwined. There's a credit lesson from Money Sense in the Money Coach program, so I think you'd find a lot of similarities there. So do visit that role decision tool if you are interested in becoming involved with any of our other volunteer opportunities. We are here for you. I hope you know that. Again, thank you so much for your time today. Please don't be a stranger. If there's anything I can do to make your experience better for you, and I can't thank you enough. You are all crucial to the success of our program this year. I know I call on you all the time, and I appreciate the involvement that you have in our programs. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.